Hello students, let us discuss the next lesson in moments, weathering the storm in Ersama. Okay, let me brief you or give you an introduction of this lesson. The story gives an account of the storm or super cyclone that hit the coastal town of Ersama. Where is Ersama? It's a city located in Odisha, earlier called as Orissa. Odisha state in the year 1999. So, Ersama was hit or attacked by a super cyclone in the year 1999. A young boy, Prashant, he is the protagonist, the main character of the story. A young boy, Prashant, faced the fury of the storm. Fury means the violence. Okay, and reached his village after a lot of difficulties or troubles facing. Ultimately, he reached the village. The details of how he worked hard to help the villagers and how he overcame the devastation or the havoc or the great loss caused by the superstorm really inspire us to have courage and a positive approach towards life. Through this story, we will come to know that we must have optimistic attitude, a positive attitude. We must not give up or abandon anything in life. We should muster our courage. We should be courageous to accomplish the things, and we should always try to help the people around in need. Okay, and this lesson gives us such a wonderful message. Let us discuss this now. Weathering the Storm in Ersama by Ersama. Okay. On 27th October 1999, 7 years after his mother's death, Prashant had gone to the black headquarters of Ersama, a small town in coastal Orissa, some 18 kilometers from his village, to spend the day with a friend. Okay, the date was given. That means this is a real incident, a real story that happened somewhere. Where is that? In Ersama, a small town in coastal Orissa. Because the year and the place were mentioned. When did the incident take place? On 27 October 1999. 7 years after his mother's death. So, 7 years passed away that his mother died. 7 years ago, before the story took place, before the super cyclone occurred, Prashant lost his mother. Prashant had gone to the block headquarters of Ersama. That is the main headquarters, means the important branch or the main place. For example, in Ongole, in Prakasam district, Ongole is the headquarters of the Prakasam district, nothing but the capital, the main city in which all the infrastructure and all the important offices and all the place important transport systems, everything were located and within the reach. A small town in coastal Orissa. Now we call this as Odisha. Some 18 kilometers from his village. So this Ersama was located 18 kilometers from where Prashant used to live. And why did he go there? To spend the day with a friend. To visit his friend, he went to Ersama. How far? How far was that Ersama, or was that village from where Prashant lived, from his place? Some 18 kilometers. He went to spend his time with his friend there. In the evening, a dark and menacing means dangerous and harmful. Okay, storm quickly gathered, as shown in the picture. It was termed as a super cyclone. Very fierce, violent. Winds beat against the houses with a speed of fury that Prashant had never witnessed before. Here, in this context, actually, fury means a great anger or temper, but in this context, extreme strength. Okay, superpower that Prashant had never witnessed. Prashant never witnessed such a cyclone earlier. First time he had seen such a violent cyclone storm. Heavy means huge and incessant. Incessant means unceasing, continuous, uninterrupted, non-stop. Rain filled the darkness. There was a lot of downpour, heavy rain, followed by wind. Filled the darkness. Everything became quite dark. Ancient means old, belong to old times. Trees were uprooted. The old trees which were growing there for hundreds of years were uprooted. The cyclone or the storm felled the trees, destroyed the trees, uprooted, and crashed to the earth. They all fell onto the earth due to the power of the cyclone. So in the first and second paragraphs, the effect, the havoc or the devastation caused by a cyclone has been explained to us. Screams rent the air as people and houses were simply washed away. Screams means a lot of shouting. People started shouting due to the unexpected storm. Rent means filled. Spread the air as people and houses were swiftly means quickly, briskly, rapidly washed away. So the houses and the people, everything was carried away by the swift rainwater or the flood water. The angry waters swirled. Angry means the water which is moving with a lot of force. Swirled means moved or flowed along with a whirling motion with a lot of speed and current. That means water current, force. Running water has a lot of force, you know that. It can carry anything on its way. Into his friend's house. Where was Prashant then? In his friend's house. He visited his friend then. And he was there. Neck deep. He was struck. Prashant was struck in his friend's house. Neck deep. That means a lot of water. That means reached there. And so the houses and all the places were submerged in water till neck. That's why called neck deep. A lot of flood water was collected there, and Prashant was stuck there. The building was of brick and mortar. The building was constructed of brick and mortar, means a mixture of lime, cement, sand, and water used to construct building. That means it was a paka house. It means strongly built house, and was strong enough to survive the devastation of the wind's velocity of 350 km per hour. Since the house, Prashant's house was made of bricks and stone, or of course mortar, it was strong enough and it could withstand the devastation of the wind, though the velocity of the wind was 350 km per hour. No damage was caused, but it was submerged in the water. But the cold terror means extreme, the cold climate, extreme cold conditions. Terror means your fear, a lot of inconvenience. They were filled with a lot of fear because of the ferocious storm. But the cold terror of the family grew with the crashing of trees. That means the family, the members of the family, of course Prashant's friends, family members were filled with a great fear. Cold terror means great fear or great threatening, that is caused by the super cyclone of the family grew or developed with the crashing of trees. That means the cyclone or the storm broke the trees into pieces and uprooted them, and they all fell on the ground that had got uprooted and fallen on their house. And a few trees which were uprooted fell on Prashant's friend's house also and fall on their house. Sometime in the middle of the night, it was midnight, and damaging its roof and walls. And due to the falling of the trees on the top of their house, the roof and some partly the walls were also damaged. Some breakage was seen there. Some cracks were developed in the walls also, and the roof was damaged by the falling of the trees there. The crazy destruction wrought by the cyclone and the surge of the ocean continued for the next 36 hours, although wind speed had reduced somewhat by the next morning. The crazy destruction, that means the maddened, the forceful destruction, that means there was a lot of destruction or devastation caused by the super cyclone. Wrought means produced as a result of something, the result of the cyclone, by the cyclone. And the surge means gush, the force of water, that's what you call flood, of the ocean continued for the next 36 hours. Means a day has 24 hours, that means that lasted 1.5 day, 36 hours. Although wind speed had reduced somewhat by the next morning, so by the next morning the wind speed gradually diminished or reduced. That was not blowing in such speed, that means 350 kilometers per hour as it blew earlier, somewhat reduced by the next morning. To escape the waters, that means the flood water rising in the house, the house and the places, the total village was submerged under water, you know that. To escape the waters rising in the house, Prashant and his friend's family had taken refuge on the roof. So the total house was filled with the flood water caused by heavy rain, and they did not find any shelter there, and they thought that it was not safe enough to stay in the house. And so all the members of Prashant's family, of course Prashant's friend's family, took refuge or shelter on the roof, so that they thought that they would be safe. Prashant will never forget the shock he experienced at his first glimpse of the devastation wrought by the super cyclone in the grey light of the early morning. So Prashant never experienced such a super cyclone, violent storm earlier since of his birth, and he will never forget the shock also. He would never forget. It is the most memorable to him, a bitter experience, and he experienced at his first glimpse means sight. First time he happened to see such a cyclone. Devastation means the loss and the damage caused by the super cyclone in the grey light in the early morning. That means before the sunrise, just like dawn. He could see the loss or the damage caused due to the cyclone in the grey light, which is not bright enough. A raging, deadly brown sheet of water covered everything as far as the eye could see. Raging means rising, forceful. Deadly means causing a lot of fear. Okay, brown sheet of water. See, the water became polluted, contaminated. So, the water filled with the dirt and all the impurities and became brown and covered like a layer there. Brown sheet of water, that means the polluted water The muddy water covered everything as far as the eye could see, and there is no land anywhere. Everywhere they could see a stretch of brown sheet of water. Only fractured cement houses. Fractured means broken or destroyed. Cement houses still stood in a few places. Only a few houses are still seen standing there in position. And bloated animal carcasses. Bloated means swollen. Animal. That means some animals were carried away through the flood water and they died. So in course of time they swole. Okay, swollen. They became enormous in size due to the storage of water in the body. Bloated animal carcasses means dead bodies of animals. Dead bodies of animals are called carcasses, and dead bodies of human beings are called as corpses. And human corpses, that means human dead bodies floated in every direction. So after the flow of the wind decreased, and everywhere there is a brown sheet of water, and what was flowing on that? The dead bodies, the bloated animal carcasses are dead bodies, and human dead bodies are corpses were seen everywhere. Number of animals and people lost their lives due to the super cyclone there. It was really saddening. All round, even huge old trees had fallen, and a lot of old trees also were destroyed and they fell onto the earth. 2 coconut trees had fallen on the roof of their house. 2 coconut trees fell on the roof of Prashant's friend's house, which caused a lot of damage to the roof and walls, where they were taking shelter or refuge. This was a blessing in disguise. Blessing in disguise means, in this context, an apparent means clear misfortune or bad luck that eventually had good results. Of course, something is good out of bad. So they were in such a pathetic condition, and they were taking shelter on the roof of the house, and they had nothing to eat, but as a blessing in disguise. That means that coconut trees which fell on the roof were useful to them to feed them. Because of the coconut, drinking the coconut water only, they could survive until the storm subsided, until everything became normal. The conditions become normal. That's why this was a blessing in disguise, because the tender means soft, raw coconuts from the tree kept the trapped family. That means Prashant's friends and all the members of the family from starving in several days that followed. The super cyclone continued many days, and all those days Prashant's friends, family and Prashant remained on the roof of the house, and they could survive by eating the coconut meat and by drinking the coconut water. Okay, and that was nothing but a fortune to them. God sent them a blessing, indirect favor. Otherwise, if those trees did not fall on the roof of the house, they would have starved and they would have died because of starvation, means due to lack of food. So how could they keep themselves alive? How could they satisfy their hunger? By drinking the coconut water. So that's why it is stated as a blessing in disguise. For the next 2 days, that continued. The storm continued next 2 days also. Prashant sat huddled together in a group. Who are the remaining members? Prashant's friends and his family members all stayed on the roof as shown in the picture beside here. With his friends' family, in the open on the rooftop. They were on the rooftop, top of the roof, open place, and it was very horrible for them to spend their time there that many days. They froze in the cold, but the weather conditions were extremely cold, unbearable, intolerable. So, freeze, froze, frozen. They could not bear the extreme climatic conditions prevailing around them. They froze in the cold, and incessant means continuous rain, non-stop rain. The rainwater washed away Prashant's tears. So, if the tears could not be seen or not visible due to the rainwater, but he struggled, waited for the rain to stop, the cyclone to be under control. The only thought that flashed through his mind, flash means struck, came to his mind. What was the idea or thought that he got? That was whether his family had survived the fury of the super cyclone. Now he started thinking of his family and his family members, and he worried about their safety. The same storm must have occurred in his village also. He bothered about the safety and survival of his family members. Fury means already explained you the violence at the great loss caused by the super cyclone. Was he to be bereaved once again? Bereaved means to have lost a family member or a friend to death. Already Prashant lost his mother 7 years ago. That was explained to you at the beginning, and he was afraid that he had to lose some more family members due to this cyclone, and he was bothering or worrying a lot about their family member, about his family members. 2 days later, so this two days, Prashant and Prashant's friends, family members all remained on the top of the house only, which seemed to Prashant like 2 years. The 2 days were passed just like 2 years to Prashant, and it was very horrible experience, bitter experience for him to stay there in the extreme cold climatic conditions helplessly, and it was a bitter experience that he could not forget in his life. The rain ceased means stopped, controlled, and the rain water slowly began to recede means reduce. So when the rain stopped, automatically in course of time, gradually the rainwater which was collected there in the form of flood reduced. Okay, Prashant was determined to seek out his family without further delay, and Prashant determined to seek out means to find out. He wanted to go in search of his family members without any delay, because he was greatly worrying about his family members and their safety, and he thought something might have happened to his family due to cyclone, and he was stuck here and they were in his village. But the situation was still dangerous. The condition was still out of control, very dangerous, and the storm, the super cyclone, had not completely under control. And his friend's family requested with Prashant to stay back a little while longer. When Prashant determined to go to his village to seek or to find the safety of the family members, or something, how they were, his friend's family members requested him, urged him to stay there some more time, because still they expect the danger. But Prashant knew he had to go, and Prashant decided to reach his village and find out the situation or the condition of his family members. He strongly determined under any circumstances that he had to reach his village. He equipped himself with a long sturdy stick. So nearby he got a strong Sturdy means very strong, rigid. Long sturdy stick, and then started on his 18 kilometers expedition, means journey. In this context, expedition means journey all the way. And you know that how far uh, Prashant's village from his friends village Ersama, that is 18 kilometers. So he decided to go on journey to his village, expedition back to his village through the swollen flood water. The flood water is still there, gradually receding, decreasing, but still it's flowing, and that is not completely decreasing. It was a journey he would never forget. As we discussed, it was an unforgettable journey and bitter experience for Prashant, which he could not forget. He constantly had to use his stick to locate the road, and it was very difficult for Prashant to find the road at the bottom, because everything, all the roads were submerged or filled with the river water, and he took the help of the stick to find out the road, to locate the road, and to get some support to determine where the water was most shallow. And with the help of the stick, long and sturdy stick, he tried to find the or locate the road and know the shallow place. Shallow means which is not deep. The opposite of shallow is deep. And he wanted to find out where the water is not very deep, so that he could travel through the way and reach his village. At places it was waist deep. Waist means the part where you just tether or tie your belt. Okay, the middle part of your body. It was waist deep. Still the water is not completely receded. Not the level of water is still till the waist. And progress was slow. The water movement was very slow, because somewhere the way has to be cleared. Then through the gutters and through the canals and the holes, drainages, the water might escape. But now the water movement was very slow. Still the level of the water is seen there. At several points he lost the road and had to swim. In most of the points, many points, he could not find the road, even with help of the stick, and there he had to swim and manage. After some distance, he was relieved to find two friends of his uncle who were also returning to their village. And to his luck, he, after traveling some distance, some kilometers, he found his that means two friends of his uncle who were also returning to the village like Prashant. They were also going to the village. They were also somewhere when the cyclone occurred. Now they were also returning home, going to their village. They decided to move ahead together. They all decided to proceed, to move ahead and to reach their village. As they waded means swam in this context. Actually, wade means to walk through the deep water or mud. In this context, swam, swim, swam, swum. So they all waded, or they swam through the waters, the lot of difficulty, the scenes they witnessed, the situations and the scenarios and the sight they had seen, that appeared, grew more and more macabre, means horrible. What happened? Everywhere the carcasses of the dead bodies of animals, dead corpses means human dead bodies, and all were floating there. And that was, the sight was very horrible, ferocious. They had to push away many human bodies on the way, men, women, children, and carcasses of dogs, goats, and cattle. The current swept against them, as they moved ahead. Current means the force of the water. So the flood carried out all these animals and men, women, children, all people and different kind of animals, and they lost their lives, and now their bodies were bloated, swollen, because the water accumulated in their bodies and the body size increased, and they became weightless, and they were all floating on the water, that they could not see that. Very horrible situation. In every village that they passed, that they came across, they could barely see a house standing. Almost all houses were destroyed. There was no house to see standing erect. A lot of damage was caused due to the super cyclone. Prashant now wept, means started crying bitterly, out loud and long. Till then he controlled his grief, his sorrow, and the sight or the situations made him weep loud. Really was moved with the situations, and he could not control his grief. He was sure, he was confident that his family could not have survived this catastrophe. Catastrophe means a great disaster, that is super cyclone, and he was sure that his family members also would not have survived. They would have also been killed. They would have lost their lives due to this disaster, super cyclone. He was not sure enough that they would be alive. Eventually, means next, Prashant reached his village. So finally, Prashant reached his village with a lot of difficulty. What is that village? Kalikuda. His heart went cold. That means he had a bitter experience, a lot of grief. He was very sorrowful. His condition was very pathetic. Okay, where their home once stood, he reached the place where their house was constructed or built. What happened then? There were only remnants. The house was not seen. Remnants means small remaining quantities. Due to the devastation, due to the havoc caused by the super cyclone, the house, Prashant's house, was broken or devastated into pieces, and it was now in remnants of its roof. Everything was destroyed. Some of their belongings, so their bag and baggage, their articles and all the things that they had in their house, some of Prashant's belongings were caught. He could spot them. He could discover, oh, these were my articles. These are the things of our family members. Mangled and twisted in the branches of trees just visible above the dark waters. So they were struck and twisted, okay, here and there, and lost their shape because they were struck and they were trapped in the branches of the trees and visible to, they could be seen by Prashant in the dark waters. The dark water means the water is quite contaminated, polluted, became dirty and giving a filthy smell, foul smell. Young Prashant decided to go to the Red Cross shelter to look for his family, and nearby there was a shelter. Red Cross means is a non-profitable or non-commercial organization, voluntary organization, which provides service to the needy and the poor people, sometimes blood, sometimes medicines, and sometimes daily essentials, food materials, clothes, etc. Under these circumstances, earthquake, floods, cyclones, etc., they would take initiative and help the people in need, and they also give shelter. So he also reached the Red Cross shelter to look for his family, and he thought that his family members, if they were really alive, they would be taking shelter in the Red Cross shelter there. So he was thinking of reaching the Red Cross shelter nearby to seek his family. Among the first people he saw in the crowd was his maternal grandmother. So after he reached the Red Cross shelter there, and there were many people, lot of crowd, and he could see whom did he see first? His maternal grandmother. Maternal means mother's mother. Paternal means from father's side. He could see his maternal grandmother. That means the mother of his mother. How was she? Weak with hunger. She was famished. As she did not have enough food for a long time, she became weak, tired, exhausted, with hunger. She was starving. She rushed to him, and immediately after she saw Prashant, she rushed means she approached him, her hands outstretched. He stretched her hands. She could recognize Prashant, and she could not control herself. Her eyes brimming means filled with tears because of affection and knowing that he was safe. It was a miracle means a great surprise, astonishment. They had long given him up for dead. They had long given him up for dead. That means the members of Prashant family lost their hopes upon Prashant. That means as Prashant thought that his family members would not have survived, they also thought that Prashant would be no more. He would also be killed by the super cyclone. And now, against their expectation, contrary to what they expected, they could see Prashant, and so their happiness had no limits, and their eyes started brimming. They could not believe their eyes. It was incredible. Quickly, word spread, and his extended family gathered around him. So, the information was passed from one to another, and all the members of the family of Prashant gathered there around him. They all reached at one place and hugged him tight in relief. Okay, embraced him, showing their love and affection. Prashant anxiously scanned the motley. What's the meaning of motley? Disparate, varied in appearance or character. You can understand the condition of those members. Prashant anxiously, a lot of anxious means somewhat stress and strain. He was not relaxed for a long time. Anxiously scanned the motley, battered group. Okay, he had a glance. He looked at the people who were injured. All those people are the sufferers, helpless, destitutes, who lost everything. Okay, some people lost their brothers, sisters, children, mother, father, and those were all suffering a lot. Battered means injured group. His brother and sister, his uncles and aunts, they all seemed to be there. But he was moved with pity at the situation, at the sight that the people were in, because their condition was horrible, and they lost most of their family members, the villagers, and they lost their house and all the belongings, and now they had nothing with them, and now they are starving, remaining hungry. Okay, the water was there everywhere around us, but not fit for drinking. It was not fit for drinking, and the food nowhere, the food was not seen. So they were in a lot of miserable condition. By the next morning, as Prashant took in the desperate situation in the shelter. Now he estimated. He came to know the condition of the people, the helpless people, the situation that prevailed in the shelter. He decided to get a grip over himself. He wanted to do something for them. He wanted to help, give a helping hand. He sensed a deathly grief settling upon the 2,500 strong crowd in the shelter. See how many people were there in the crowd that taking shelter in the Red Cross shelter. 2,500 people almost, suffering a lot due to various reasons, by losing their family members, kin and kith, and the crops, their houses, their assets, their belongings, and everything. Nobody could comfort them, console them. A huge number, 2,500. 86 lives were lost in the village. Almost 86 people lost their lives due to the super cyclone. Men, women, children, who were there. All the 96 houses had been washed away. 96 houses were destroyed and carried away by the flood water. It was their fourth day. 3 days passed away, and it was the fourth day that still they were taking shelter in the Red Cross shelter. And nobody was there to offer any help, to provide them food, and to look after them, to take care of them. They were helpless. So far they had survived on green coconuts, but there were too few to go around such a tumult of people. Tumult means, what's the meaning of tumult? Uproar of a disorderly crowd force. Of course, those people could survive on green coconuts, just like how Prashant and his friends' family survived with the help of the tender coconuts, raw coconuts, that trees which fell on Prashant's friend's house. And here also same situation prevailed. And these people also, the people in the crowd also survived, and they could live, they could satisfy their hunger by drinking the water in the coconuts. Okay, that there were few to go around such a tumult means uproar of a disorderly crowd force. But how? 2,500 members were there, but those coconuts were not enough to satisfy the hunger of the people there. They suffered a lot. Prashant, all of 19 years, decided to step in as leader of his village. He was hardly 19 years, but he took a bold step and decided to lead the people in the village, to do something for them, to give a helping hand. He did not have an idea how he would do that, but he decided, he took initiative. If no one else did, the people have to die and they have to suffer. Okay, many people would die. Not only that, 86 people. He organized a group of youths and elders. Youth means youngsters and grown-up people, to jointly pressurize the merchant once again to part with his rice. So he discussed with the young and elderly people, and that they go and demand the people, merchants who sell rice and provisions, that is the time to part with their rice. That means to offer some rice, to give them something as donation in order to save these people. That was their moral responsibility. This time the delegation, the representation succeeded. So their motive was successful, their initiative was successful, and returned triumphantly means victoriously, successfully, wading through the receding waters with food for the entire shelter. They could convince the merchants there, and they were generous, kind-hearted, and they could get some rice, some provisions, some food materials, vegetables, etc., the required for preparing food, and they could reach the shelter through the decreasing water there. And now they were sure, they were confident that they could supply food, they could provide food for all the 2500 people there with the collected provisions. No one cared that the rice was already rotting. Branches from fallen trees were gathered to light a reluctant and slow fire on which to cook the rice. So okay, they brought rice, but they have to cook that. The fire is required, and no one cared the rice was already rotting, means getting spoiled. Immediately the rice should be cooked, once soaked, otherwise that will be spoiled. And they must make fire now, but there are no dry branches or no firewood for them to get fire or to create fire. Branches from the fallen trees were gathered to light, but no use. Reluctant means unwilling, and slow fire. The branches of the fallen trees which they gathered were wet. They were soaked in rainwater, and so they could not create fire to cook the rice. They tried their level best to cook the rice. For the first time in 4 days, for the first time in the 4 days of suffering, the survivors at the cyclone shelter were able to fill their bellies. With a lot of difficulty, they could cook the food and provide the food to all the people taking shelter in the cyclone shelter. They felt very happy after 4 days that they ate heartily. His next task was, Prashant's next task was to organize a team of youth volunteers to clean the shelter of filth, urine, vomit and floating carcasses, and to tend to the wounds and fractures of the many who had been injured. Okay, he could supply food, he could satisfy their hunger, but still he had to do a lot. And he discussed with the volunteers, and he wanted to make some campaigns to clean the shelter which was filled with rainwater. The surroundings were polluted with dirt and pollutants, dead bodies of animals and everything, and that must be cleared off immediately. Otherwise they are sure that epidemics or some kind of infectious disease will spread. And so they took a bold step or came forward to clear of that waste materials, dead bodies and everything, filth, urine, vomit and floating carcasses, animals, dead bodies, and to tend to the wounds. Some people were injured and some people got fractured, the bones were broken, and he wanted to give some first aid or some kind of relief to the people who are suffering from wounds and fractures and injuries. On the 5th day, a military helicopter, it was after 4 days, on the 5th day, the information or the message reached the concerned officers. A military helicopter flew over the shelter and dropped some food parcels. It then did not return. They supplied some food materials, packets of food to them. It then did not return. Okay, then it went off and did not come again. The youth task force gathered. They formed some groups. The young people formed some groups to initiate or to continue with this kind of rehabilitation and supplying food, giving first aid and cleaning up the surroundings. Different kind of groups were there, and youth task force gathered empty utensils, empty vessels, plates, dishes, etc. from the shelter. Then they deputed the children to lie in the sand left by the water around the shelter with these utensils on their stomachs to communicate to the passing helicopters that they were hungry, because nobody knew the situation there, that 2500 people helplessly remaining or staying in the shelter, and that youth task force wanted to let the concerned officers know, they wanted to bring to their notice, and so they gathered some kind of empty utensils or plates and asked the children to lie there, keeping their the utensils or the plates on their stomachs, so that the people flying over the helicopter and the officers and the personnel of the helicopters could see and understand that the people were hungry and helpless. The message got through. Okay, by and by, the information passed on to the concerned officers and the military and all the rescue operations. And after that, the helicopter made regular rounds, and the people, the officers, realized that they wanted to help, and so they visited the place, that particular village, the shelter, to supply whatever they require. That means they supplied the food and other basic needs for those the people living in the shelter regularly. See how their idea worked out. What did they do? They let the small children to lie on the ground in the sand and keep the vessels or plates or utensils on their stomach, so that they would appear, they would be seen by the people going by, traveling by helicopter, and they could understand that these people are in need of food and they are starving. That was really a wonderful idea. Prashant found that a large number of children had been orphaned. Orphan means a child who loses either one or both of his parents to death. You know that nearly 86 members died, and so some lost their mother, some lost their father, some lost both, and now they became orphan. Orphan means without parents. Nobody was there to take care of them. They became helpless. He means Prashant brought them together and put up a polythene sheet shelter for them. He arranged a shelter. He gathered them all, and he provided a shelter using a polythene sheet. Women were mobilized to look after them, and women were posted, or women were engaged to look after the small children who lost their parents in the particular shelter arranged for them, while the men secured food and materials for the shelter. So they were assigned with different kind of duties, and women were asked to look after the children in the shelter, and men had to go in search of the food, to gather the food for the people in the shelter. As the weeks passed, some weeks passed, okay, Prashant was quick to recognize that the women and children were sinking deeper and deeper in their grief. So Prashant understood that the youth could supply or provide them food, water, etc. But still they were suffering a lot due to the loss of the family members. And Prashant understood that. He persuaded the women, means he motivated, he strongly advised them to start working in the food for work program started by an NGO, non-government organization. That means he understood that in order to get rid of the grief and the suffering, those people had to be engaged. They must work. That's why he requested them, he advised them, all the women, to start working in the food for work program. In many villages this program is going on, initiated by the government. They will work so that they will be given some food. That's what you call food for work program, started by an NGO organization, non-government organization, volunteer organization. And for the children he organizes sports events. And what about children? To divert their grief and their suffering, because children also lost their mother and father, and sometimes some of them both. And so in order to divert, he organized, or he arranged some sports events for them. So they were completely engrossed in that, engaged. He himself loved to play cricket, and he was fond of cricket, and so he organized cricket matches for children, and they all enjoyed playing the cricket. Prashant engaged with other volunteers. He took the help of, he encouraged the other volunteers to help the widows and children to pick up the broken pieces of their lives. Broken pieces of their lives means to repair the loss. They lost their family members. To offer some help, to give a helping hand to them. Okay, he brought the loss and all the havoc, devastation caused by the super cyclone to the concerned voluntary organizations and government organizations seeking help. The initial government plan was to set up institutions for orphans and widows, and the government institutions started planning for constructing or building some kind of uh, institutions for, especially for, that means hostels, rehabilitation centers, training centers for orphans and widows. Widow means the women who lost their husbands. However, this step was successfully resisted, as it was felt that in such institutions children would grow up without love and widows would suffer by stigma and loneliness. But some people did not like the idea, because if children were admitted in some kind of hostels and widows were admitted or given shelter in this kind of rehabilitation center, and they would have to continue there alone, and they would from time to time remember their family members whom they lost, and they will feel loneliness. They will suffer a lot when they were alone. That's why that was not a good idea, and the people decided not to admit or not to join the children and the widows in such kind of institutions. Prashant's group believed orphans should be resettled in their own community itself, possibly in new foster families. Foster means a family that provides custody or guardianship or protection, whatever you call, for children whose parents are dead and unable to look after them. That means they should not be taken and given admission or join in such some kind of orphan center or these kind of institutions, because the children may become, they might make themselves sick that they were orphans and they lost their parents every now and then. That's why they should be allowed to live in such other the people and communities and together, and so they might not suffer. Made up the childless widows and children without adult care. So the children also would feel a lot, and the widows would feel a lot of suffering. And so if they live together in a community or colony as a group, so they would help one another, and they might not suffer, they might not remember the death of the family members. So that was a good idea. It is 6 months after, yes, 6 months passed away, and after 6 months, the devastation of the super cyclone, the great loss or the damage caused by the super cyclone, this time Prashant's wounded spirit has healed simply because he had no time to bother about his own pain. Prashant wanted to help others. That means he always thought of the welfare of others, means he was being selfless, and he wanted to help the people suffering or in need, and he did not bother about his personal pain, his sufferings. He gave helping hand, he assisted the people over there. His handsome youthful face is what the widows and orphan children of his village seek out most in their darkest hour of grief. And all the people, the widows who lost their husbands and the children who lost their parents, are remembered his great deeds and how he helped them in need, and he was a hope of light. Okay, or he could be remembered by all the people there whenever they were in trouble and they could not forget him forever. So in such a way, Prashant took a great initiative. That means he acted as a ray of hope, and he lit the lamps in the house of the people who lost their kith and kin and family members. He helped them a lot to rebuild their houses and lives and live happily, peacefully. So all the credit goes to Prashant, though he was young. So from this lesson, we understand we must be bold enough. We must not suffer when we get into the problems. We must try to solve the hurdles in our life, and we must help others around us, help the people around us in need, and give them a helping hand, and be in the hearts and minds of the people forever. Okay, service to mankind is service to God. Okay, with this noble message, that means love all, serve all. With this noble message, I would like to end this lesson. Thank you very much.